Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to AUB and to this event organized by the AUB Nature Conservation Center. Before we begin, I kindly ask you to put your phones on the silent mode, please. My name is Sara Badran, and I'm a researcher at the AUB Nature Conservation Center, and I will be your host at this closing event of our 2024 Roundtable series, which is titled Preserving the Green Agenda During Humanitarian Crises and Conflicts, Balancing Priorities and Safeguarding the Day After. While last week's ceasefire was welcome, we recognize that the road to a just recovery is long and filled with challenges, including ensuring displaced individuals return to adequate living and environmental conditions as soon as possible. Addressing environmental priorities during humanitarian crises and conflicts is a complex task. However, it is crucial to balance humanitarian, environmental, and development needs and priorities in order to ensure equitable living conditions to everyone now and in the long run. Before we proceed, I would like to extend our gratitude to the AUB leadership team, including President Dr. Fadlou Khouri and Provost Dr. Zahir Dawi, Vice Provost for Research, Dr. Eli Ael, and Dr. Imad Balbaki, Vice President for Advancement and Business Development. AUB trustees who are here among us, including Sarim Karajerjian, Minister of Environment, His Excellency Dr. Nasser Yassin, the AUB NCC Advisory Board, Chairwoman Asmahan Zain, and Ricardo Karam, the AUB NCC Executive Committee, including Dr. Yasser Abu Nasser, and colleagues from the Ministry of Environment, embassies, UN and international agencies, AUB, civil society, and the private sector. We also deeply appreciate the support of our series partners and would like to thank UN Habitat, CWS Middle East, and Synapse. Now, I would like to invite Provost Dr. Zahir Dawi to deliver the welcome remarks.
Good morning, trustees, Minister Yassin, panelists, colleagues, partners, and participants. In times of humanitarian crisis and conflict, our attention naturally turns to the immediate, extinguishing the fires that rage, healing the wounds that need tending, and rebuilding the homes, the schools, the hospitals, and the lives shattered by devastation. These are pressing priorities under difficult and complex circumstances, and they certainly demand urgent action. Yet, alongside this urgency, there is a deeper responsibility we cannot overlook, to ensure that our survival is not just reactive, but visionary. True response relies not only in weathering the storms of today, but also in safeguarding the foundations of tomorrow, including our environment, our shared resources, and the delicate balance that sustains our lives. This gathering today reflects our shared commitment to this vision. It is an opportunity to ask essential questions. What remains when the chaos subsides? How can we protect what is irreplaceable? And what legacies will each one of us leave for future generations? At the American University of Beirut, we have always seen ourselves as more than an institution of higher learning. We are a vibrant community devoted to service and transformation. For over 158 years, our mission has been to educate citizen leaders, to generate knowledge and improve lives. From classrooms to labs to the clinics, from Beirut to the world, AUB has been a beacon of progress, harnessing cutting-edge research and education to tackle the most pressing challenges of our time. The work of the Nature Conservation Center, NCC, our hosts today, exemplifies our commitment to bridging knowledge with action around nature and the environment. Crises and conflicts often devastate not only communities, but also the natural resources that sustain them. Rivers become polluted, forests disappear, and fertile land is destroyed. These losses are not incidental. They strike at the very foundation of human well-being, Surviving the conflict must mean more than rebuilding physical infrastructure and providing immediate human relief. It requires safeguarding the ecosystems and natural heritage that sustain people, communities, and their future long after the crisis has passed. But the challenges we face today cannot be solved in isolation. The existing complexities require collective action. Through the AUB NCC Roundtable series and with the support of our partners, we have brought together voices from academia, civil society, international organizations, government, and the private sector. This diversity is not just a strength, it's the foundation of meaningful and effective action. Along these lines, and to further strengthen AUB's role in informing public policy, we have also recently launched the Government Engagement Platform, GEP, with a key goal to amplify conversations and expand collaborations with governmental and intergovernmental agencies through harnessing the wealth of AUB expertise and resources. Let us move forward with the determination to protect not only lives, but the very systems that sustain them. Thank you for your dedication to this vital cause, and I wish you all a most engaging event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to also acknowledge Dr. Salma Talhou, also a member of the Executive Committee of NCC, before we proceed. And now, Dr. Alan Dow, Director of AUB NCC, unfortunately was not able to join us in person, but he has shared a video which highlights the recap of our 2024 Roundtable series, which was titled The New Roadmap to a Green Transition, Exploring Today's Climate Actors. One second.
Good morning, and thank you all for being with us today. I want to apologize for not being able to attend in person. First of all, I want to thank President Foure and Provost Dawi for their unwavering support to NCC, and I want to thank Minister Yassin, the panelists, and Dr. Ael for their valuable time and input. If you allow me, I want to link this event to the broader NCC series. As part of AUB NCC's strategic roadmap for 2030, this roundtable series were created to foster open exchange of ideas, explore intersectionality for research, and identify priorities and dynamics. Ultimately, the series aims to increase outreach to diverse audiences. This year marked the second roundtable series, the new roadmap to a green transition, exploring today's climate actors. The series focused on examining the roles and strategies of key players driving the green transition in the face of the current climate challenges. The first roundtable explored the role of municipalities in Lebanon's climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts, especially as the country faces delays in municipal elections, which weaken the connection between local governments and their communities. While political and economic stability have dominated public concerns, Lebanon has been grappling with urgent climate issues, such as rising temperatures, water and energy shortages, and increasing emissions, which impact social, economic, and health systems. This panel ended with the speakers all in agreement about the vital importance of implementing climate mitigation and adaptation at the local level through municipalities. They highlighted the importance of local governments in combating climate change despite the obstacles. This conversation pointed out the challenges in finance, administration, and politics that municipalities in Lebanon encounter, which need to be addressed successfully to execute climate strategies at the grassroots level. The second panel discussed challenges and potential lessons for managing e-waste sustainably in Lebanon. The speakers highlighted key lessons learned and provided policy recommendations to guide the governance of this sector, aiming to contribute to Lebanon's green transition. The panel highlighted key challenges in managing e-waste in Lebanon, emphasizing the need to separate e-waste from solid waste management due to its unique components and complex handling requirements. Solutions discussed included regulating imports to ensure better quality electronics entering Lebanon, as well as implementing policies for producer accountability, such as extended producer responsibility, to ensure responsibility for the life cycle of the product. Additionally, the panel stressed the importance of quality control through legal frameworks, decentralized e-waste dismantling by local SMEs, and designing products that are durable and easy to repair or recycle. In conclusion, addressing Lebanon's e-waste challenges requires a multifaceted approach that involves local action, regulatory measures, and a shift towards a circular economy. The third roundtable discussion brought together activists, journalists, and academics to explore how research has contributed to the environmental agenda in the past. The discussion focused on the impact of research, its connection to practical solutions, and its ability to reach a global audience beyond academia. It also examined the role of citizen engagement with research centers, tools enabling inclusive research, and the importance of knowledge translation in making research more accessible and impactful. In sum, over 600 attendees from 15 different countries participated in the panels. We had 27 panelists from across sectors, including international organizations, academia, local CSOs, the public and the private sectors. To conclude, going back to the title of this series, the new roadmap to a green transition, exploring today's climate actors, and with the ongoing war on Lebanon, we should join our efforts not to miss once again an opportunity to rebuild better, and I hope we have learned our lessons, and we will seize this opportunity. Hence, the importance of today's closing panel. So I wish you the best, and I will be listening carefully.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Nasser Yassin to deliver his keynote address.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning. It's not a keynote address, just some reflection perhaps on the situation. But let me start by thanking AUB leadership. President Khouri is not with us, Provost Zahidawi, VP Balbaki, and everybody from AUB for such an important and really much needed and timely workshop and discussion on the management of rubble and rubble removal. Yesterday I was in Nabatiye. This is my second visit after the ceasefire. I visited on Saturday as well. I visited Tir, I visited Dahi on the first in the morning, early morning of the ceasefire. I visited West Biqa as well. The level of destruction is unprecedented. I think I lived the civil war. I lived several Israeli invasions and attacks. I lived the 2006, I wasn't in Beirut, but I was following closely. I was studying in London. But this is the scale and the amount and the level of destruction is unprecedented. I think the data has been showing this, and this is not to add to anything of the scientific knowledge that's being built, but just to say that whatever we do in the development, humanitarian, academic world is still nothing compared to what the war machine can do. We are actually running after now rubble removal for the last couple of weeks. We've been running to support our displaced communities and people for the past couple of months, and it's been very slow. It's been under-resourced, been underfunded. It's been seen as a, and still the rubble removal is going to be seen as a very slow process, whereas this war machine funded by the world leading countries has actually did this in seconds, in a matter of seconds. I think for the 158 years of the life of AUB, inshallah, for the many, many 100 years for AUB, this is going to be one of the most destructive wars that we've witnessed in the history of Lebanon. But let me take you to 3 guiding principles we're putting for rebel removal. And it's not easy. Let me start by saying our experience in rebel removal in Lebanon hasn't been positive. There's still a pile of rubble near the port of Beirut in what we call the Bakalian parking lot or Bakalian piece of land that we haven't managed to really recycle or manage or do anything about for the last 4 years since the Beirut blast. We have funding, it's not like the issue of funding. We have the technical know-how. We have a lot of technical resources and expertise. We have the willingness of the Ministry of Environment, yet it's extremely impossible to find a piece of land to recycle this and to manage it. We are actually maneuvering in a very tough terrain in Lebanon, politically, culturally, economically, socially. So let's start with this first introduction to the discussion that rebel management and removal is going to be very, very, very hard. So just to prepare ourselves to what we're going to face in the coming weeks and months. But as a Ministry of Environment, we've put 3 guiding principles that will help and will support the process of rebel removal. First, let's use this, as cliche as it may sound, let's use this as an opportunity. This big crisis that we've been facing for the past month and a year, more than a year, but particularly since the aggression intensified since September 23rd, and what resulted in destruction and in the casualties and losses. But let's use this as an opportunity for all sectors, but particularly for what we're discussing today when it comes to rubble removal. We want to take this rubble, do all the recycling approach to it, really implement the concept of circularity, maybe for once in this country, and fill all the quarry sites and rehabilitate those abandoned quarry sites that have been, for many, many years, been illegally doing their quarry activities. We've identified tens of these quarry sites, many of them in public land, so we're not in any way infringing on private property. So those were illegally quarrying those sites. So, and we're going to issue today, I'm going to sign, it's already signed actually, a circular on how to manage this using those quarry sites, and there's a huge list of this. So hopefully everybody is going to take this seriously, and we're going in a couple of minutes or in 30 minutes to the Prime Minister's office to discuss this in more details. And I stress not on the academic and civil society and the UN to implement this, but on our governmental counterparts. This is where we need also a lot of collaboration. So my second point in the guiding principles, in addition to taking this as an opportunity to apply circularity, is really to be collaborative and be fully collaborative. As government entities, and this is my message to my colleagues in the government and to other entities in government, but also to civil society, to academia, to the international organizations. We did manage in the past couple of months to really create a coordination mechanism for the responding to the needs of the displaced population. And it was functioning relatively well given all the crises we've been facing. This is perhaps one of the most coordinated responses when it comes to the humanitarian response, perhaps in the past wars and crises we've faced as a country. And this is was put together by the Government Emergency Committee, with the UN, with NGOs, with the municipalities, with governors. So let's take this as a lesson learned, which was quite successful, in maintaining such coordination when it comes to the first days of rubble removal, early recovery, and later reconstruction. And this requires a lot of data sharing, lots of sharing scientific knowledge, lots of sharing methodologies, and so on and so forth. We have a rubble task force that's ongoing, it's working, and we want to build on this for the next steps. But my third, and it's quite important, and I raised this yesterday in the Council of Ministers, this has to be a fully transparent process. And I put in the experience we did in responding to the humanitarian needs. And we went fully transparent of what we get and what we send and what people are receiving. Everything is published. Publish what you get, publish what you send, publish what you deliver, everything on a platform. And we wanted to do so, and we were pressured also by colleagues to show us where this aid is going, where people are receiving them, and we were happy that we were asked by all the oversight bodies in the country to show the evidence, and we did show the evidence. This process requires even more transparency, because rubble removal has one element of reconstruction, but reconstruction has a lot of, I dare to say, opportunities for corruption and mismanagement of funds and finances. So I actually want everybody, but also the academic, being here in this beacon of intellectual life of Lebanon, to raise the bar for transparency and accountability. Nobody would be able to count how many trucks are going to be sent, right, Dr. Issam? It's going to be tough. You can count food parcels, you can count mattresses, but maybe it's going to be difficult to count the tons of rubble that's being removed and try to be dumped somewhere outside villages, towns, and cities. So this is a call for practicing transparency. We're going to count every and each truck. We need your help in doing this, trying to find the best mechanism, the best scientific ways of doing so. At the end, I'm going to push, as a Ministry of Environment, to really do this in the most sustainable manner, with the title of the working paper produced by the NCC. I'm going to take it with me to the Rubble Removal Task Force later today. This is really an opportunity for AUB to practice what we've been working on previously and now with the government engagement. I really wish everybody can take this as an opportunity to build more and more the bridges between the academic life, the research life, the capacities we have in the university and the government. And I want to underscore something. There's a lot of people who are decent in government. Don't think of them are, that everybody is corrupt or, they are inefficient or they lack the capacities. No, there's a lot of people in government that are decent. They want to work. They've been working under very, very tough conditions for the past few years, and particularly in the last 2 months. This is where we need to start. If we don't play, a central role, or we don't push for a central role for the government to be played, at least in the coordination of the coming process, and be with them, support them, push them to work harder, support them in delivering what they're mandated to do, we're going to fall in the same vicious circle of a weakening state, a fragile state, and a state that might fall again to more crises and more wars. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. I'm sorry, I don't usually leave after the introduction, but we really have this meeting with the Prime Minister on the rubble removal, so we have to leave around 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nasser Yassin. Now we will move to the panel discussion, which will address the critical question of how do we reconcile sustainability priorities with humanitarian action. I would like to invite our moderator, Antoine Kallab, and our esteemed panelists, Aline Jaimani, Hazmik Danzigyan Khouri, Eli Mansour, and Karen Jmayel.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of AUB and NCC, welcome to the closing roundtable of our 2024 series. Provost Dawi, thank you for your welcome remarks. Minister Yassin, thank you as always for your continuous support as well, and the speech you just gave. This will definitely give us a lot of content to build on in the conversation. And as you can see from the selection of panelists we have today, we are really trying to get all the possible perspectives when it comes to how do you talk about long-term goals that might not seem a priority at the moment in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. However, following our discussions and our research, we do believe that they are inherently interconnected. We cannot talk about return to communities without talking about the conditions to which they are returning to. And when we talk about conditions, we're talking about enablers of public health. We're talking about creating a safe and healthy local economy. We're talking about proper urban planning, and we're talking about the proper environmental conditions. So I'm happy to be joined by this esteemed panel. And perhaps so we're going to start actually with Karen. I will let each panelist introduce themselves very quickly. Karen, we're going to start with you. So after you introduce yourself, maybe you can give us a bit of an understanding on why an organization like ICRC, that is one of the flagship organizations in immediate humanitarian response, has been investing further efforts in linking or understanding, I would say, the environmental aspect of the humanitarian context in which you operate. So perhaps you can introduce yourself and talk a bit more about your work and from, what is ICRC's perspective on these issues.
Thanks, Antoine. Very happy to be
Can we hear you? Yeah, I think you need to turn it on to speak.
All right. Thanks, Antoine. Very, very happy to be here. So I'm Karen. I'm an environmental engineer. Originally, I studied civil engineering here in AUB. And currently, I'm the environment and climate change specialist at the ICRC Beirut delegation, just your neighbors here on Jeanne d'Arc Street. Your question, Antoine, on why the ICRC is involved in humanitarian, we get this a lot. First, let me start by saying that environmental and climate crises are humanitarian crises. They threaten the future of humanity. As well, on top of that, the climate crisis is altering the severity and the nature of humanitarian crisis and how we respond to it. I think the number is, I have a specific number in mind. Out of 25 of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, 14 are undergoing some sort of violence or armed conflict. So you can see that around the globe, most people or populations that are enduring conflict are also the most vulnerable to climate change. And they are the ones that are usually mostly neglected by climate action and climate financing. Keeping that in mind, the ICRC has adapted its response to people to situations of conflict to support people who are undergoing these dual shocks of climate and conflict. As the ICRC, we understand that our activities, the humanitarian activities, have repercussions on the environment, and for that we try to minimize them, minimize the effects as much as possible. In fact, the ICRC has co-led with the IFRC, the Federation, the Climate and Environment Charter for humanitarian organizations, to sort of galvanize and to steer the humanitarian action into collective action that can minimize the impact on the environment and build climate resilience. Maybe here I can give a small example, which I'm very proud of. The Beirut delegation here, your neighbors on Jeanne d'Arc, have undergone a quite significant decarbonization journey, whether it's electrification or solarization, as well as looking at all the other impacts and trying to minimize them. So looking inwards on waste, on energy, on electricity.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And bringing back the conversation to the current context in Lebanon and the current crisis that we are going through, what is the environmental story of the humanitarian crisis? What are the stories that perhaps are not being told, but that eventually are finding their ways into the livelihood of each and every person affected by the crisis?
Yeah, so like I said, it's pretty integrated, the environmental crisis and the humanitarian crisis. The World Bank, I don't know if you saw the report, they just released a damage analysis report. Yeah. The section on the environment was quite shocking for me. This is considering only until September of this year, meaning they are excluding the most intense 60 days of conflict. And in that they say, for example, 13% of the forests in Lebanon were damaged. So this is a humanitarian crisis that also has environmental considerations to take into account. 13% is a very big number. Can you imagine how much time it will take to reforest out of all?
And this is only until September?
Only until September, it's excluding the last 60 days. Of course, there are many losses and damages, but if I want to focus on one thing that we keep seeing in all the humanitarian crises, we were having this discussion with Aline the other day, it's been a protracted crisis since the Syrian refugee crisis, the wildfires, the economic crisis. I mean, I don't need to list them. And at every step, we seem to encounter the same environmental challenge, which is waste. We keep seeing waste coming up, and we keep seeing how the humanitarian response is contributing to this waste. So, for example, I mean, of course, naturally, when you have a displacement of a population, or you have refugees coming into the country, the concentration of waste will change. The waste will not be spread out anymore, it will be focused in one area. But the humanitarian response is contributing to that waste, whether it's humanitarian aid packages, food parcels, single-use plastics, single-use items, also food. We saw a lot of videos on food waste. So this is a crucial part and an integral part of the environmental crisis and how it's linked to the humanitarian. And maybe one untold challenge in the humanitarian and the environmental crisis is behavior from the humanitarian organizations themselves. Until recently, humanitarian organizations haven't been looking at their own impact because I liked what Dr. Zahir said, it's extinguishing fires. We are always running to put out these fires. And the first responder will not think about climate resilience. This is not their priority, and I totally understand it. And anyone who's been a Red Cross or civil defense will know this is not a priority. But if we had integrated environmental sustainability in the programs from the building of the response plan, because the response plan is built, you don't just go and extinguish the fire. If the environmental and climate resilience was already mainstreamed in the plans, I believe we would have seen different results.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Aline, I'm going to jump to you. So after you introduce yourself quickly, let's start first by looking, if you can talk to us a bit about the humanitarian landscape in Lebanon in terms of actors and practices. And of course, you're a public health practitioner, but then also trying to also give us your take on how environmental degradation or environmental challenges are an inherent part of the health and humanitarian crisis we're going through.
Thank you, Antoine. So I'm Aline Germani. I am the director of the Center for Public Health Practice at the Faculty of Health Sciences. I'm also the co-coordinator of the Humanitarian Engineering Initiative at AUB, which is a joint initiative between FHS and the Maroon Sam'an Faculty of Engineering and Architecture, and I pinpoint this because this is where also we bring in this issue of multidisciplinarity, being able to innovate now as an opportunity for solutions. I think, so as Karen said, this is, as we all know, and it's no secret, we have been faced with a series of protracted crises and way beyond 2019. Nasser, Minister Yassin did say, sorry, as a colleague, I'm dropping the title. So Minister Yassin did mention the civil war and all of this. And I think the main, in my opinion, the compounded environmental vulnerability in public health is the issue of water access and water vulnerability. So this has been, and we see it more and more when we are faced with a crisis, when we have this mass displacement, even mass refugee incomings into the country. Water accessibility, water vulnerabilities are being exacerbated, and this is no secret. So many reports do discuss these issues. It contributes to humanitarian exacerbation during crisis. It is also a reason for crisis. We know this. And first responders, as Karen said, do contribute to this because we do not, the quality of the water and the access to water and water sources is so scarce, we are relying on bottled water, which is also contributing to solid waste that is concentrated around the shelters and on the streets and in the neighborhood. So I think this is one of the, I can't say much about the humanitarian landscape in terms of Definitely there are issues related to coordination, but yes, we have seen in this crisis that the coordination has been better in terms of, in comparison to previous crises, but we do still have to enhance, and I think Hazmik is going to speak about this, we do need to enhance the standards that the humanitarian actors in relation to environment they are implementing in the response. And there are standards. So we have the sphere standards, which are the standards for humanitarian action. It does integrate very well environmental sustainability in our humanitarian action, and I think at a later stage we're going to talk about the recovery also, but I think this is also a main issue on how the humanitarian landscape can actually contribute to a better response. Waste management, Karen, you've talked about this. Wastewater disposal, I think also Minister Yassin and others. So we're talking about rubble, that's true, but wastewater disposal is an issue also, which has been a protracted crisis in Lebanon for so many years. Today, when we have shelters in schools, that they have no capacity. So there is no capacity for WASH, which is water and sanitation. They have no capacity for waste water disposal at this volume, not being linked to the waste sewage systems in the country, which also are facing major problems. And this is something that we don't think about. So this is also, as humanitarian actors, we contribute to this. Sometimes we dig septic tanks when we should not be digging septic tanks. We dig septic tanks without thinking about how can we pump the water out of these, and the sustainability of pumping wastewater from those septic tanks. So interruption of schooling, and how can we assess, this is a public health issue to us, so it's a determinant of public health. So the interruption of schooling, how do we deal with this? How does humanitarian, are we supporting education? Mainly in the humanitarian landscape, we are focusing only on, most of the time, on the basic needs, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, Eli, others. But we focus very much on food parcels, water. We overlook issues related to continuation of education, especially for school children. I think we all went through phases where we interrupted our schooling. We've been here for so long. It's not a major issue, I think, at the university level, but it is a major problem at a young age and at the schooling level. I'm going to stop here. I'm not sure. Did I answer your question?
No, you did. So actually, I'm going to jump to Eli. So Eli, after you introduce yourself, maybe you can give us a brief overview of how we've been doing in terms of, let's say, enabling return conditions. I know you worked heavily on the post-Beirut blast recovery. You're well aware of what happened in 2006, more or less. So maybe give us a brief overview of some of the challenges we face in Lebanon in terms of return. And in terms of, from an urban planning and then development perspectives, some of, any lessons have been learned and what is still yet to happen.
Thank you, Antoine. I'm Ali Mansour. I'm managing the urban planning and design unit at the Habitat office in Lebanon. Can you hear me now? So, Ali Mansour, managing the urban planning and design unit at the UN Habitat office in Lebanon. I've been here since 2013. So this is my 11th year at Habitat. And since I came here, I came on to respond to the Syrian refugee crisis and then to the multiple economic crises. These were all our projects. I'm giving examples. I'm not an academic. I don't know the theory, but I tell you how things were going. And then in 2019, responding to the different COVID and the Thawra, and then afterwards the port of Beirut explosion. So I don't know if we can call this situation a protracted situation, because every now and then you do have a major event that really disrupts everything, and you think at a certain moment that this major event will change things. But unfortunately, it's not. We continue to respond to crisis and then to other crises with no limits or with no prospects on where are we heading to. Last time we were discussing, Antoine, and you said probably this war, and you recused saying the word, it might bring an opportunity. I believe that there is an opportunity after each crisis, to really reset everything. And for us, working in a humanitarian development context requires three major things. One is to have proper policies. And I guess you tapped onto this, for example, as you will be talking about this, I believe. Then infrastructure, then the communities. And when I say communities, I don't mean just the people who are living. I mean private sector, local authorities, everyone who is within this algorithm. So basically, if all those are strong, I guess life would be better. But unfortunately, the three levels that I spoke about, in terms of governance, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of community, there's a lot of things that needs to be worked. Every time we speak to a donor, they tell us, apply reforms and we will give more money. Apply reforms, and what are those reforms? If you want to dissect what is the spectrum of reforms that we want to do. So for me, first, theoretically, the three levels should be respected and should be up to a certain standard so that you can really provide good well-being for people. Then if we want to talk about our experience, I'm going to highlight a little bit in 2006. I wasn't there, but I was working as an engineer after the 2006 war in Dahish, in the southern suburbs. I didn't know anything about Habitat. I didn't know anything about the approach of how to really deal with this large-scale destruction and what could be the good elements to deal with it. Just between the brackets, after every crisis in Lebanon, in 2015, I had the chance to do a publication with Hanna Foundation on solid waste after the crisis of Re'ame and the first recommendation was to decentralize the sector and to send it on municipalities. This was probably the main action. The municipalities or local authorities should be at the forefront. And every now and then, and every crisis, you hear that municipalities are at the forefront of responding to all these crises, despite everything that they are witnessing. In 2006, I guess, our program established regional technical offices at the level of unions of municipalities in the south, Bint Jbeir, Jabal Amil, and Sur. And this was a practice to somehow localize a little bit the intervention, because there was no master planning, there was no recognition of what could be done for the damaged houses. So the regional technical offices comprises of people, of local people, experts in GIS, in civil engineering, in architecture, in social working aspects, etc. They guided people on how to reconstruct in a good way. Now you received a $45,000, I don't know, compensation for rebuilding your house. Your house is 200 square meters. 45,000 can do you 100 square meters. So they guide them how to really engineering advice on how to build the foundations, how to build this part of the house so that when they do have an additional compensation, they might expand in the future. So this was one of the aspects we tried to localize it. And for instance, they brought a shuttle where they visited all villages in the union so that they can guide people in their return. So my point here is, and I want to stress on this, and this was probably the basis of me being here, is how to localize this intervention in a sustainable, innovative, engaging, coordinated manner. And I believe the local authorities, they do have a due in front of their people. They are elected after all. And I guess now, and I heard, I'm sorry I came late, I witnessed an accident at Forum at Beirut, so I couldn't hear the speeches, and I apologize for this. But I heard about Robert. I'm listening to the news. You know, we all follow channels during the war, channels on WhatsApp. I know now municipalities are calling to action, and whoever wants to come and bring his own tools to come and start sweeping the streets and taking off rubble from municipalities. So municipalities are at the forefront, and they try to be at the same speed of people. Our people returned now. We need to take action. And last, I guess, yeah, strengthening local authorities will speed up recovery, will speed up probably medium to long-term sustainability plans. I stop here, the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Eli. Hazmi, I think many of us see you as the responsible voice of the private sector. So, I think, obviously, please do introduce yourself, but also if you can tell us first, when we talk about humanitarian crisis, people oftentimes overlook, on one hand, the fact that it's affecting the private sector, on the other hand, some of the contributions and the role that the private sector is playing in terms of response. And we had a discussion the other day that people also sometimes tend to think of the private sector as these big, huge corporations. But at the end of the day, these micro and SMEs and businesses and even individuals, they are also part of the private sector. They are part of the economy, and their, let's say, operations are being affected by this war, but they're also responding to the crisis. So perhaps we can start a bit by giving us an idea about this, and then we move on to how sustainability and environmental sustainability is connected to this.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I thank AUB, of course, and I thank the NCC in particular, and I'm honored to be among these lovely panelists. Initially, I'm also an AUB undergrad who fled to McGill and graduated from McGill. So I have a bit of here and a bit of McGill in my blood. That's why it always feels like home. I want to switch from answering that particular question in the immediate sense, because I want to benefit from the fact that the minister is still here to hear me out, because I also have a thought that I would like to convey. Sustainability is a lot built on the private enterprises and the private sector actually being a big leader on sustainability. And through today environmental, social, and governance aspects, we all work towards that. And the private sector is very transparent, and I'm in admiration of what the private sector has done. Without any rules, without any regulations, without anything being mandatory. I mean, today, the private sector I work with has gone the extra mile of actually wanting to do and to make an impact, be it environmentally, be it socially. The reason why I would like to benefit from your presence, Minister, is because I think the governance aspect falls, and the accountability that you spoke about and the transparency that you spoke about, and the fact that we are implying the municipalities into the whole conversation, and we're actually making them be the biggest actors. Yes, true, the private sector does kick in, but the main drivers are the public sector and exampled by the municipalities. First, I think there's a very important factor to make the work that was being done by the private sector become more or less mandatory. I mean, globally, I work with a lot of frameworks. There are lots of indicators out there that allow the private sector to be transparent and to report in an accountable way. As of January 1st, 2025, the entire European Union will have to abide by the CSRD. In Qatar, the stock exchange makes it mandatory for ESG ratings and for proper reporting. So today, the reason why I want to make use of your presence, I know that there's a sustainability law that was initially, I think, brought forward by the community at USG, and I happen to know the professor behind that. And I think there's an opportunity here, because I want to look a little bit further than the rubble, and I want to look a little bit further down and say there is an opportunity to make sustainability and the accountability and the transparency factors become mandatory. Not just depend on the good will of the private sector and the way they want to push this forward. So this is the number one idea I wanted to, and I really admire your momentous double hat that you're wearing, be it in the environment and doing the work that you're doing on the crisis management. I think the micro enterprises that Antoine is talking about have shown, although I hate the word, resilience. And they have shown how they can actually make a difference on the humanitarian factor, on the social aspect, and on the environmental factor. I work with a fossil fuel company, and I think this company has a lot of applaud to be made towards them for the work that they are doing. Because somewhere, somehow, putting the elephant in the room and talking about it makes all the difference, and measuring all the aspects of that impact that they're making. Institutions and sustainability impact the private sector as much as they impact the public sector. So I think it's time to really think of a proper PPP and to actually push forward a mandate of somehow to make all this voluntary work first appreciated and then make it more and more obvious. Thank you. We'll get back to the...
Actually, I'm not going to let you go. If we can, I agree with everything you said, and we've had these conversations several times before. But, you know, how is the humanitarian crisis more or less putting additional pressure on this entire situation? And is it in one way or another deterring the private sector from, let's say, investing or engaging in sustainability, given the instability of the situation?
I don't think that it's deterring or it's not shifting at all. I think the private sector has really come in and played a very active role in contributing to resolving whatever is immediate and issues around it. I also come from a banking background, and I don't want to talk about the banking sector at all because, okay, I know that it's going to create a whole other conversation. I'm a member of the Environmental, Social, and Economic Council, and especially in the Environmental Committee. And I do know that about 70 members who are in that council have each somehow thought out and played a role. There's a very big economic opportunity that was out there because of the crisis. And I think the companies that were prepared, and that's why I'm pushing even the government to be prepared, have been able to take the challenge hands-on and actually make a difference in the direct communities, in making benefits of whatever demographic change that was done in the surrounding areas. That's what comes to mind right now.
Okay, thank you, Hazmik. Aline, I'm gonna go back to you. If you can, let's talk about. I mean, I know we are talking about the issue. The issue of rubble was mentioned more or less, and I think we'll have enough time in the coming weeks as well to learn more about, you know, what are the possible opportunities. But at a broader level, what are perhaps, if we want to talk about the main time issue with the rubble is coming from the return of displaced communities. And you know, they return to the houses, their villages, and the communities that they had to leave in such a you know drastic matter. Let's talk a bit about the conditions to which they are returning to, and perhaps talk about the determinants, or maybe the health and the environmental determinants that are perhaps affecting, to which degree all of them can go back to their home villages, and perhaps where we should start shifting resources and priorities in that sense.
So I'm going to tap on the World Bank report, that latest assessment of damage that was done. and I think I'm going to, there are several points related because we consider them as determinants to public health and the conditions of return. So housing units, and which is also related to rubble, it is estimated that more than 100,000 housing units has been destructed. So this is an issue of shelter, which means an issue that is related to livelihood. So the conditions of livelihood of those communities when they return, no shelter, some of them, agricultural destruction definitely, because most of these areas are agricultural regions, and it shows also the destruction on the agricultural landscape. So again, an issue which is related to the livelihoods of the populations in these areas and their economic power, which has been definitely touched. The issue of unemployment. So also it estimates that already we have an issue with unemployment. It estimates that from the affected population, 166,000 lost their jobs. Again, issues related to livelihoods and let's say health determinants. So I'm not touching only on the environment. So there are issues related to the environment, but also issues related to health and conditions. Definitely there was more strain on the water sources in the region. The poverty is an issue. So today we want people maybe to rebuild better. We want people to reconstruct in a maybe environmentally sustainable way. Maybe we should be supporting them in, let's say, sustainable agriculture, the sustainable use of the land, but there is no economic power behind this for the individuals to be able to do this on their own. The poverty levels has tripled, it seems. So I think, I'm going to stop here on the issue of waste, solid waste. It is estimated that you have a destruction in waste bins, waste trucks, and already we have issues in waste disposal and waste management in Lebanon, which is now exacerbated by this mass destruction. So this is the landscape of where we are returning. This is where the population is returning. We have issues related to disability now because of the mass injuries. So damage to health facilities. It is estimated that 66% of hospitals have been damaged, 36% of primary health care centers. There are concerns related to white phosphorus and the land, which are not yet clearly established by the evidence. So this is where we are returning, and this is where maybe, unfortunately, we all hate to talk about opportunities and crises, but what is it that we're going to do regarding this? I would like to build on what Eli has said. It has been shown that community engagement and localization do improve the recovery. The relevance of the reconstruction, of rebuilding the economy, of rebuilding employment in a particular area, but what is the support that we are going to provide to these municipalities? What are the financing mechanisms? And finally, we are revolving, we run in a vicious circle, which is the circle of financing, the economy. We go back always to that same point. We cannot rely forever on donations, on the international aid, because this has shown from many previous crises that it is not sustainable. So how can we rely maybe on the private sector, on innovative financing mechanisms, on new funding and financing mechanisms at the level of the municipalities that can allow them to generate revenues and thus develop solutions that also could be taken at scale. We go to the business and the business school and business models. How can we bring these solutions to scale. I think I'll stop here because I'm going to hand it. This is a question to my colleagues in the panel.
Thank you. Karen, I want you to give us your perspective on what Aline was just saying. So she mentioned I would say the diversity of perhaps of challenges in terms of livelihood, environment, and so on. So is there any way we can invest more actions in on environmental response to perhaps mitigate some of the other challenges that we're facing?
Yes, actually, I wanted to start with another point that Aline was saying is on the financing. So maybe we start with that and then we go to the part on livelihoods. So we can all, I think, acknowledge that there is a significant gap in climate financing between stable countries and fragile countries. And I think that was the whole, initially the whole point of COP29 this year. For humanitarian actors, this translates directly in donor requirements. The donor requirements, the more stringent they are on environmental topics, the more you will see immediate actions, bold steps, ambitious steps to integrate environmental response into the humanitarian response. Another point, and the point on livelihoods, I think this is quite important because climate action is two things. It's climate mitigation, but it's also climate adaptation. I'm sorry, I think it's climate resilience also. So this is, climate resilience factors directly into livelihoods. For example, if, let's say, Antoine, there's a humanitarian organization that's working on livelihood projects in agriculture. The integration of environment comes also through climate smart programming and climate smart operations. In a livelihood project on agriculture, why not consider, for example, drought-resistant seeds? If I'm going to look at climate information for the next 15 and 20 years and know that I'm going to be working in an area that is drought-prone, then the response needs to adapt to that. It needs to integrate drought-resistant seeds, maybe look at traditional methods of irrigation, or earlier sowing. So we need to adapt the livelihoods and all the programs actually to match the environmental response. Maybe one last point, which is important for me to mention, is also giving climate action a seat at the table when the relief plans are being built. If it's already at the table, then it's not retroactive. Then you don't, you still need to do climate adaptation, but you are already integrating climate mitigation from the beginning, and you are kind of shifting the narrative from these, let's say, quick wins of recycle, don't turn on the AC, all this stuff, to climate change is here, okay? We need to adapt to it. We need to build proper adaptation mechanisms. We need to build proper resilience and continue to reduce our footprint, because reducing the footprint is vital. But if you do not support communities in adapting to the changing climate, then it's really, the impact is going to be very small. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, and it actually leads me to another question. What is missing? What is, what kind of incentives, let's say, we're still missing for humanitarian actors to very much to give the climate or the environmental agenda a seat at the table? We know that eventually funding follows priorities, and we expect it one day to be considered as a priority, even within humanitarian conflicts.
I think it's starting to be considered already as a priority. Like I said, through donor requirements, more and more big donors are enforcing some more stringent than other environmental requirements, so it starts with that. Then, like I said, shifting the narrative is important. Look, the humanitarian mission will always be life-saving. It's not an environmental organization. You always need to respond, you need to save lives, you need to provide aid in the acute phase of a response, right? But if you're able to kind of shift this narrative and integrate it already as maybe not a priority, but as a mainstreamed cross-cutting theme, then it's not a standalone project. Then your colleagues who are working on programs, on assistance programs, they already have it in their plans. So let me give an example. It might be a simple example, but I like giving this one. It's the food parcel, right? So let's say you Antoine, are managing a basic assistance program in a humanitarian organization, and you usually give out food parcels, but your organization has integrated environmental cross-cutting themes as a priority, so you're pushed to reduce waste from your program. The first thing you think about is, okay, let me look at this food parcel. I see that the rice comes in single-use plastic. Let me move to compostable bags for rice. And I will make the bold assumption here that you are able to find suppliers who give you these compostable, not stamped biodegradable, actually compostable bags. But the problem is that the cost will be, let's say, 30% extra. So now, and these are like theoretical rough numbers, instead of reaching your 1,000 beneficiaries, you're reaching 30% less. This is not viable, it will not fly. Like I said, your priority will be life-saving. But if there were, for example, other humanitarian organizations in the market demanding the same kind, also maybe corporations and private sector, big players on the market who are asking for this kind of quality, maybe in the future even subsidies for this kind of material, maybe the cost will go down and you will be able to integrate it as part of your response. So humanitarian organizations, we don't operate in a vacuum. No one can face these challenges alone. We need to look at it from a macro scale sometimes as well.
So exactly, so we are talking about changing the culture within the humanitarian actors themselves, but also mainstreaming the availability perhaps of this product. So we're talking about intervening at the supply chain.
Yeah.
We're talking about production, we're talking about governmental standards on what can we find in the market.
Definitely.
So these are very interesting points. And this is where Hazmeen, I want to come back to you and say, how can we have perhaps a more sustainable private sector that is capable of, let's say, feeding humanitarian actors with the necessary resources, let's say, in an emergency context, but at the same time, to start integrating these sustainability conditions across production chains.
Actually, Antoine, Karen touched on something that I really wanted to pursue. I think this procurement exercise across, be it for INGOs, be it for the private sector, be it for any kind. I think the way I advise the companies I work with to work is always to be able to, okay, the non-compete indicator has also helped a lot. I call this sort of one of the diseases that our country and our region has, is this exclusivity. And being able to come out of that and allowing your procurement and your supplier and your chain of your supply chain to become one of you and integrated with the same values that you have as an institution, and trickling all of this down and making it mandatory, whereas there is no other solution but to pay 30% more to get a biodegradable packaging, so going with the example that Karen gave. And to make it really across where, and that's why I'm asking for some kind of a mandate to come in, where we're all at the same starting line and we're all working together to achieve a sustainable future. I really don't, I'm not the type who likes to look in the immediate sense what's happening right here. I really want to see that long-term vision, and I really want the rebuilding and the cleaning and the rebuilding to happen in a thought-out exercise. And I'm very apprehensive of your report and the drama that's happening now with everything, because this is one of the ideas that I was pitching for one of the companies I work with, to actually go and partake in the cleaning up. And I understood of what's happening, and trying to speak to avant-garde CEOs and chairpersons who are a little bit avant-garde, because they are visionaries, and these are rare gems in this country. You don't, but to build on these and to make them wish upon their suppliers to come on board, and that's how you create this culture and you propagate it. This would be wishful thinking, is it?
So we have to be driven by something. Thank you, Hasmi. You and I, for the past maybe 2 weeks, we've been in touch almost on a daily basis on the issue of the rubble, the construction and demolition waste. On our hand at NCC, we've been meeting with embassies, with donors, with actors, to make sure that this is the consequences of the war are beyond anything that we've seen in the past few decades, and this is why it requires a collective effort. We need to pull on every lever we can to make sure that, on one hand, the donors are putting in the right conditions, leveraging internationality, but at the same time, that they know they have the right counterparts and partners when it comes to implementation, strategizing, and so on. So perhaps you can give us a bit of context on why currently the issue of rubble is taking, let's say, the importance and the big space that it is taking, and perhaps how it is linked to the humanitarian crisis more or less.
Okay. There's a lot of actors working on rubble. This is to start with. Probably you started with being on a daily basis in contact, and I mentioned it once in one of our calls, because you do have the speed to act quickly. And I guess in such situations, noting that we do have past experience and lessons learned from 2006 and 2007, I don't know if I'm and after the Beirut port explosion, there's a lot of lessons that needs to be learned. And I recall that on the 4th of August, after the explosion, straight the second day, on the 5th of August, we heard 15,000 persons came to Beirut to sweep the streets and to help collecting the rubble and et cetera, et cetera. And then afterwards, in December, we discovered that most of our rubble is asbestos contaminated. And I don't know what were the precautions that those people took when they were sweeping and really supporting their communities. You know, it was an emotional moment where we all wanted to do something for our city. In 2006, I don't know, probably people know more than me, but most of the rubble were either dumped into the sea or into the rivers, or they found a quarry for a private person who on his own expenses took the remaining rubbles of Dahya. So it's a complex matter. Why now won't we think of an action that can be sustainable, starting from the collection, leading to the transport, leading to the disposal sites, leading to recycling. I read the reports for Dr. Isam and in your policy paper that we are able to recover around 50% of, or probably, or even more of the rubble that has been generated. So here, your role in this policy sets a way for more tangible actions that can be implemented on the ground. For us, there's an effort now under the Ministry of Environment, and we're attending a task force that was established by the ministry. And there's a serious discussion of now where to take the waste or the rubble at the right moment. There's a lot of complexity on this issue regarding if we take it to public lands or if we take it to existing quarries, public quarries, or even there was talks about taking them to existing construction and demolition waste sites. Because we know that all of you mentioned that we do have complexities in waste management, and according to reports, we have around 300 construction and demolition waste sites that are informal, that can be used. So basically, the discussion now, and I'm co-chairing also a UN task force for debris. Yesterday, we submitted a debris management framework for the Prime Minister. It's a framework, and it sets the way, a guidance somehow. It's similar to what you have produced in terms of a policy paper, Antoine. But we aim really to have those forums and regular meetings with task forces to bring onboard all expertise, all knowledge, all capacities to agree on a way to benefit from this opportunity. And again, I need to say it as an opportunity to really learn from our lessons, build for a sustainable future. Today in the morning, and it happened perhaps, my father-in-law sent me a video from Gaza. People were scavengers. They were collecting tiles from buildings, destroyed buildings, or pipes, or whatever, and they were shaping them a little bit so that they can sell them to people who are living on the seas, because tiles might bring some weatherproofing inside a room, or pipes that can be used by people. So he's refurbishing, recycling, small actions, and he's doing a good livelihood out of it. So imagine environmental actions, okay, in addition to the environmental costs that we are enduring out of all of this, but there's a lot of opportunities that can be derived. Starting from a small entrepreneur who can really start doing a business until a big construction and demolition waste facilities for Lebanon that can set the way for the future. Now, after the explosion, we didn't have any construction and demolition waste facility in Lebanon. We had the intention to establish one in Beirut, but it didn't go through. So probably this is the opportunity to establish this. We had the idea of establishing a facility where people, if you destroy your bathroom at your house, you can bring the rubble and either get incentives or get pebbles so that you can use them elsewhere. So there's a lot of a value chain out of rubble, out of which we can save the environment. Last thing I want to say here, or two more things about one related to, I forgot the first one, so I'll talk about the second one. Okay, so the second one. Trying to look at this crisis not as a sectoral crisis as well. And now we're talking about just trouble. I talked about municipalities. They talked about the private sector, climate, and policies. It should be a cross-sectoral response to this crisis. And now, after the Beirut port explosion, we worked together with the EU and the World Bank on the rapid damage needs assessment. It was a very sectoral, and it's still a sectoral assessment. I believe at a certain point, at any point, this is something that we promote for as the area-based approach or the cross-sectoral thinking of any response that we do. This is why we produce something we call in Syria and in Mosul and in Yemen, something we call the urban recovery framework, which is not a silo-based assessment and sets the way. It's a cross-sectoral assessment that really orchestrates all the sectors together so that they can really talk together whenever you propose any recovery for the future. We have prepared an URF for Lebanon. I hope that we can start lobbying for it. It cannot, probably we won't call it urban recovery framework because we're talking about villages in the south. We can call it probably the district, the recovery framework or whatever, but it should be at a certain point thought of, lobbied for, and probably put on the table. We had discussions with the Director General of Urban Planning and with the Order of Engineers and Architects, and they are in favor of this, but we need to find, the leeway, how it could be implemented and how could, returning back also to Karen's, like what she said about communities, you need to start really lobbying for it from the ground, because you need to be at the same speed of people and take actions as quick as possible.
Thank you, Ali. And actually, I have the same question for Aline and Karen. Is that, given that we're seeing the complexity of the rubble issue, and as well how interconnected with health issues it is, whether it's through immediate management or the long-term implications that bring us back to solid waste challenges we already have in this country, is that, my question is the same for both of you, is at which point in a crisis or in a conflict can we start or should we start talking about sustainability, about the environment, and perhaps about the aftermath or the day after? maybe who wants to start?
Way before the conflict. That's what I would say. I think we need to invest in preparedness in this country. And this is not something that we're not inventing the wheel. And Lebanon is a signatory on preparedness conventions, on the Sendai framework that is related to emergency preparedness. We teach our students in classes that they need to think about preparedness, and at Farouk, everybody, preparedness and mitigation before the conflict happened. We have, I think this is the lesson that we should learn from all of these lessons. Every time we have a crisis, it's as if we are opening a new page. So building better is part of preparedness. Integrating environmentally resilient solutions is part of preparedness. Generating revenues for financing and not relying only on international aid is part of preparedness, and I think it will be the only way in subsequent crises, because unfortunately this is what we're going to, I hope not, but this is what we're going to live again. We might be able to pick up and maybe be more efficient in our relief and response then.
Okay, thank you, Aline. Karen, any thoughts on the topic?
I'm not sure I can add much. I have the exact same wording way before the conflict. Like I said, a seat at the table when the response plans are built, when the recovery plans are built. It's never too late, but it's also good to start early in this kind of thing. Again, climate smart programming and climate smart operations are the first entry point for this kind of not reactive but proactive measures.
Thank you. Hazmi, very quickly, we talked about this in changing the culture, but we also, in terms of, let's say, if you had maybe a few recommendations for either the government or private sector actors on how to be able to balance priorities when it comes to sustainability and survival, do you think we can reconcile these priorities, or there will, these two cannot coexist?
I happen to agree. It should be a façon de faire and a façon de vivre. It should be a way that's embedded in the same way as it's not a matter of being prepared. You have to always be prepared. And honestly, I would like to share something. I was invited earlier this month, actually earlier in November, a month ago, to Armenia, to Yerevan, to speak particularly on green financing. And honestly, I was a bit jealous, because I was like, these people are talking about green financing projects and how to get financing from different European and local players on financing projects that are environmentally sound, and like we're not, and I was like, okay, and honestly, I'm not against getting funding from abroad, but not from the big players, because there's lots of banks out there and investment institutions that are prepared to, particularly, as Karen mentioned, to look at environmentally adapted projects. And I happen to know, I have a long list of some that only do that, actually. And how sexy you make your project in the environmental is going to captivate and bring them in as investors. What also ticks me off is we don't make it interesting for people who want to come in and invest environmentally. I mean, back in 2006, we lost the only glass recycling plant. And I happen to know from closed doors that the Italian conglomerate was interested in coming back into Lebanon, because they had funds stuck here, like a lot of us, and invest in actually recycling these. I think one of the lamest products that we import is glass jars and glass bottles.
Yeah.
Why should we have to import them? But you have to make it also appealing to the industrial who wants to come in by ensuring facilities, by ensuring that the infrastructure is ready, by ensuring cheap electricity, which they don't have. Okay, today they can invest in solar panels and whatever. So, I mean, it's a whole landscape that can be prepared, and I really don't think it's that complicated. I mean, we put on hold the Akkar windmill project that we were working on, and that could have been a very environmentally sound project for the north. And such projects can, different size projects, I mean, the Akkar was a huge project, but I mean, smaller projects and smaller investments can be made attractive and there's a lot to be done on the, honestly, I know we always blame the government, but there is a lot to be done on the government front. I mean, not just in policies and laws, but actually the implementation of these, you know? And what if the electricity gets subsidized and privatized, sorry, not subsidized, gets privatized, and we have more industries come in, and what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Just food for thought.
But if we apply the non-compete, no monopoly, obviously. Yeah. No, we're not against, but no monopoly.
I'm gonna ask the same question to all of you before we start taking questions from the audience. Is that given we are at the AUB and this is organized by Research Center, and also now Dr. Ael will be speaking a bit more about this, but AUB as a whole has been mobilizing to try and support the recovery and the humanitarian relief actors throughout the coming month. You know, I would like to get quickly from, you know, Karen, Eli, Hazmig, and to close with Aline, on how do you see the role of academia and research, specifically in support of the recovery process currently in the context of Lebanon? Let's localize the discussion. So how do you see, in which areas or through which actions, through what kind of research can AUB support the work that your organizations are doing and respond to the needs that are generated by the humanitarian crisis? Please do, yeah.
Academia in general and AUB, I think there are three opportunities speaking from the perspective of the humanitarian sector. The first one, for the humanitarian sector in the relief phase, the name of the game is rapidly deployable. So we need something that we can directly deploy on the field, not complicated and innovative. And I think this is where academia and research comes in finding these technological solutions. The thing is that usually people associate humanitarian aid or humanitarian work with simple solutions that are fast, but there's a lot of innovative technology out there that AUB can help develop maybe, or bring into Lebanon, or create, that can solve a lot of the problems that we face on the field. Maybe this is not a local example, but there are examples from EPFL, from MIT, of rapidly deployable solutions for humanitarian problems tied to the environment. This is the first point. The second point, and going back to what Hazmik was saying, is that there's a lot of blame to go around on where we are in the environmental situation. I think there is also a bit of blame on us, on the people who work in the environmental field. The awareness that was done so far has been, in many cases, in my opinion, superficial at best. So I can't tell you how many times I've heard people are dying, we're in a conflict, now is not the time to recycle. But environmental work is not recycling, turning off the AC only, right? So we talked about this. So a lot can go into also raising awareness from AUB perspective and from academia. And AUB is in touch with communities, and especially through NCC. So this is a good way to kind of build that awareness. And the third part, again going to climate adaptation, is the data and the amount of information that an institution like AUB can have on climate, and also on vulnerabilities and resilience, areas that need climate resilience. I think this is a good synergy between academia and the humanitarian work. So, if you answer your question.
No, thank you, Karen. This was excellent. Eli?
Exactly, I was putting the points that I was going to say, but mainly Karen mentioned most of what I had in mind. To start with, I guess AUB in particular and academia in general, yes, innovation is a good way to probably to respond to emergencies or even to plan for any recovery aspect. I can give an example. When I was in Turkey after the earthquakes, we had long discussions with the University of Istanbul based on the rubble discussion. They took a pile of rubble and they transformed it into aggregates, and then we did a mock-up house with 3D printing with the rubble that was generated by the fallen collapsed houses. So I guess it was a mock-up, University of Istanbul probably they are more, they do have more financial capacities, but it was an idea. It was proven by a scientific research from one of their professors, and then we applied it when we were there in Turkey. We printed a house of like 4 to 3 meters with the aggregates of the rubble. This is one. The second, so innovation, I agree. The second is policies and research. Normally when we do work on any proposal or any research from our side, from any like Beirut city profiling or what we do in normal, we resort back to academia and mainly AUB. Most of our references are from AUB, and this institutional memory that academia has is pivotal in a certain way. And I wish, okay, we know that other universities as well, they do have publications and research, but in particular AUB, it provides a wealth of information for us to plan to do our planning. And last, related to data, the security of data. Now we do have a project in Zahli, and I wanted to talk about this project, by the way, because it's a climate adaptation project. We are establishing the regional observatory, climate observatory for the region, and we're somehow not knowing where to put those observatory, who's going to monitor it, who's going to sustain it. And when you have the list and you see all the stakeholders, AUB comes at first. So now there are discussions with AUB to establish this urban observatory in Zahli. We are working on the urban indicators currently. And if you allow just one last paragraph, this is what I want to say. Previously, we supported the municipality of Zahli and the Qaza of Zahli to develop a territorial master plan, which is climate and gender mainstream. And basically, when you identify all the risks, all related to climate and all the socioeconomic sectors and the impacts, and you put scenarios for the future, one of the scenarios might be continuing with the business as usual. And you see the projection where it might lead you, noting that you have a high displacement there in Zahli, you have a high stress on underground water, you have haphazard urbanization that is really invading the plain, the agricultural plain, etc., etc. And then if you implement a scenario where you do climate adaptation measures, and you see the difference between the curves that might be generated by this model, this informs local authorities. And one of the decisions, and I guess it was mentioned in one of the roundtables that you organized, and I was moderating with the NCC, Zahli mayor said that when I knew that water is an issue, now I enforced in the special conditions for construction, for every building that will be built, to construct a rainwater harvesting tank underneath the building. These are small actions. I'm talking about something that is very probably nonsense, but it can make a difference if you
scale it up. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is one of many other decisions that the mayor and the councils took out of a plan that is leading the way for the future. And the vision was for this plan is Zahli is for us, but most importantly, it's for our children and for the children to come. So I guess when you do have these visions for people living here, I guess it might do a change.
Thank you. Hazmig on research, academia, and crisis.
Well, I want to say about, of course, Karen touched on it a little bit, the awareness issue. And awareness, like Eli mentioned in the Zahra example that he gave, let's not take things for granted. Let's not assume that the community that we're having this conversation with is aware of the different actions that could be taken. And I'm talking about formal climate mitigation actions. And also AUB can have a very big impact on rural communities with these awarenesses. Because I know that we always immediately think of where we're situated. But I think and I was having this conversation just before we started with Rami about the rural aspect of our communities. Beirut is something, and our rural communities is something else. And the amount of knowledge that our rural communities have is extremely limited. So I think really going out of our comfort zone and our immediate communities and going and reaching out to these communities is something important that can be done. Stats, you both touched on that, and data. I think this country has a huge shortcoming of that. And whichever way we look at, and irrelevant of the recovery and plan, we are short of data. We are short of numbers. So I think statistically, AUB and the research component can actually make a big difference there. And there is a concept I've been thinking about. Pre-crisis management, not crisis management, in all the policies and procedures that come pre-crisis, taking the avant-garde concept in place. And finally, I think AUB has done an excellent job in the history of AUB of raising proper citizens. We need more of those. So I don't know, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh yeah, but I mean the uniqueness of an AUB.
We're able to raise our own kids. But
Yeah, I know. We each do our role, and then it trickles down somewhere somehow. So citizens that are conscientious of the impacts that they make, coming to school or work, brushing their teeth, from as lame as that might sound, for as sophisticated or not sophisticated the urban infrastructure elements might sound. I think these all make a difference. And this school has a lot to do there.
I agree. Before we start taking questions, Eileen, perhaps you're the last answer to this question.
I'm going to answer it in two ways. What we are actually doing, which can support what the colleagues are talking about, and what we can do. So I'll start with, I was joking, with the last point that Hasmig mentioned on building citizenship and maybe as an education. Let's start as an education institution. We do have, and this is something that we can replicate probably, so we have implemented at AUB and specifically at the Faculty of Health Sciences, but also in other faculties, what we call service learning courses, where students actually in their courses work with communities, and this is an evidence-based teaching pedagogy that actually enhances the social responsibility of students, but also supports communities in developing solutions and being part of solutions. So I think this is a very important point. As an academic institution, we can do this. Capacity building for people in the field. So definitely we provide formal training, but there are lots of people that are involved in environment, involved in health, at local, in municipalities, in ministries, or in other places that actually need some capacity building, and probably, so beyond awareness, skills that are needed to implement environmentally, let's say, sustainable action skills, whatever, and we can go broader than this. On data, I do agree there is a scarcity. We do a lot of research, but population-based data, surveillance data, supporting and building environmental surveillance systems, because there are environmental surveillance systems that we can implement from wastewater surveillance to air pollution surveillance. So this is something where we can build capacities and support these systems at the governmental level. I think this is very important. Disaggregated data, as you mentioned, because we have data sometimes, but very specific to specific subgroups, so subpopulation groups. We need data on subgroups, but at the level of the whole country, and this is where we need to partner with leadership. We have examples of university community partnerships also, where we have MOUs with municipalities, supporting them in evidence-based programming. I think we need more in that direction. So these university community partnerships, either with municipalities or with NGOs or with other, where we are working together in developing evidence-based programs. So because we have data, they have the knowledge also, they have the context. It's not just like a one-way stream. Being a resource hub, very important. So every time I bet if we start Googling something based on Google Scholars, you find it hard to compile resources, let's say, on environmental sustainability or on health indicators. We can play a role in developing or in having those resource repositories. On innovation, for example, AUB does that. This is the mission of the humanitarian engineering, for example, developing solutions for humanitarian action, but we are still short on this. You are right. And we are short on this because we are not capable of scaling those solutions. And this is where probably innovating in business models is important. This is why I keep repeating this, because this is the main issue related to innovation. How can we implement and scale those innovations at a bigger scale? That's, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Aline. We're going to take a few questions from the audience. So my colleagues have the microphone. They can, if you raise your hand, if you have a question. We can take the first round of 3 questions, do very quick answers, and then see. Anyone has a question? Anyone online has a question? Yes, please, Erika.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erika. I have a question for Karen. You mentioned a lot single-use plastic and awareness on the issue. And honestly, as a regenerative farmer myself, heirloom seed producer, I work in the I work with environmental justice, social justice. You know, I was preaching that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And then you realize that the first world countries have the biggest impact on the climate crisis because of their industrialization. And then Israeli aggression, war, how does this affect the climate crisis, all the greenhouse gases emissions from the war? How does this contribute to the fact that these aggressions make microclimate on their own, create microclimates on their own, disrupting natural climates? And not to mention the fact that more than 75% of plastic in the ocean is from fishing nets, other fishing gears. So for me, like if we eliminated single plastic use today, if we banned it, what would be the impact of this? It's a very minor impact. And I think it's a bit naive to focus all our energy on awareness on single-use plastic when, especially now, in the midst of war, in the midst of the climate crisis, there are much more bigger factors in this equation. And I think awareness is more important, awareness on this subject is more important than on single-use plastic. And my question is, what do you think about that?
Let's take 3 questions for Mara. Thank you, Erika. Samar, you had a question. Unfortunately, we're running a bit out of time, so let's try, and then Rami.
Hi everyone, my name is Samar Khalil. I'm the Environmental and Chemical Safety Officer at AUB. Actually, I want to talk from a different perspective a little bit, because I heard what we said. Okay, we have diagnosed the problem, but however, the solutions and the propositions, recommendations that we are giving, probably as if we are sitting in a European country, having public institutions, good governance structure, etc. Not in a state where we have a failed state, in a country where we have a failed state somehow. We have people who don't trust the government or don't have any expectations actually of the government. In a place where, the government, asking the government, for example, to have a mandate or mandatory sustainability reporting or for private sector or whatever, while the government itself is the first institution who, is acting unsustainably and breaking the laws, etc., etc. So maybe we should start somehow thinking outside the box, thinking how can we introduce innovation solutions like psychosocial behavioral solutions that would influence the people who are now, who went back to their homes and started removing the rubble and rebuilding, etc. We should start also thinking about the needs assessments and the damage assessments that we are doing. Probably most international organizations are doing this, to start integrating building better and sustainable building in their needs assessments and the costing of building these villages and destroyed areas that we already were damaged by the war. So we should also start thinking about who's going to rebuild. Is it the government who's going to rebuild these damaged houses, infrastructure, agriculture, etc.? Or are there other parties who will be involved? Maybe you should start targeting those entities and trying to influence them to rebuild sustainably in a way or another. I think people have more trust and faith in their, religious entities, political parties around them, institutions that will be given the funds to rebuild later on. So we should start thinking about how to influence these.
Samar, I'm sorry, we just landed, but now we have to give the room away in a bit.
Okay, and just another point to add is about trying to leverage on civil society actors to lobby more and to monitor this rebuilding exercise to try to influence it as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Samar. Rami, you had a question. We have a question also from someone online.
Sure. Okay, so amazing discussions, and I wanted to link a number of things to reach to the point where innovation and entrepreneurship and private sector can play a role. We've talked about urban recovery framework or district recovery framework. We've talked about, humanitarian innovations. We've talked about business models. We've talked about the role of private sector and the donor community. It would be amazing if you can maybe share with us some insights about how can we capture a lot of those activities that will come up soon from all the assessments, and we can translate this down to people who can really come with solutions that could scale. And this is where maybe we look at green financing, we look at different mechanisms that are out there locally or regionally that we can channel down to innovators to build better or support building better from the context of Lebanon. So we'd love to have some input on how we can accelerate, maybe once the data is out, some solutions, some data or activities to build better with people from within. Thank you.
Thank you, Rami. I'm going to add a question from Laure de la Cloche, who's a journalist. And the question is to you, Eli. And I think you know why. So Laure is asking about Rubble to Mountains, which seems to have stalled. If you can maybe give just in 30 seconds during your answer, or less than 30 seconds, what the project was. And building on what Minister Yassin said, because he also mentioned a similar project of filling up queries, which is, what was the same concept behind Rubble to Mountains. So is there a difference now? Are there guarantees that, this approach can actually has a chance today? So maybe if, each panelist can respond to the different questions and interventions in, let's say, 2 minutes.
Should I start with the question?
Yes, please.
I think I have the political answer more than
Erica, I just want to acknowledge one point that you said, which is that there is a tendency to fall into tunnel vision when we are talking about environment. There's a very nice chart that I always see on LinkedIn, this carbon tunnel vision, where someone is only looking at carbon emissions, but there's biodiversity, there's water, there's waste, that maybe this usually happens in private sector that they are not focusing on. So it's true that single-use plastic is sometimes a topic of tunnel vision. But this is specifically why I mentioned in today single-use plastic once, and I talked about climate action maybe 300 times. I think, Antoine, if I say climate action one more time, is going to get me out of the room. This needs to be a holistic approach. It needs to come with a lot of complexities. We have to acknowledge there is no, for lack of a better term, there is no silver bullet for the environmental crisis. It's a puzzle, piece by piece. Yes, single-use plastic falls into it somehow, but there are many other things that we could and we should be doing to address the climate crisis. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to this. Yours.
Okay, to start with summer. Yes, we know we're working in a failed state and we all know the political context. But I try to put a resolution to work with local authorities and I guess municipalities. I know most of them are not functioning anymore. They report to the governor, but at least we should try with those small entities, small authorities. I just want to put an example here to play. The RDNA, the Rapid Damage Needs Assessment that was done after the Beirut port explosion, it wasn't a tripartite assessment only. The UN, the World Bank, and the EU did that, and khalas. No, it was a consultative somehow assessment that was put to get money to respond to the Beirut port explosion. And I guess the whole ecosystem that was created could be replicated. Okay, there's a lot of lessons that we can improve on this, but yes, I totally agree that the civil society should be represented. The local communities should have a voice on this. And this way, probably throughout these assessments that are jointly drafted by many actors, many stakeholders, and consulted with the government and consulted with everyone, could probably convince the donor community to create a facility. They called it the Lebanon Financing Facility, and this one, you're here, so that it can disperse the money. Probably we can, as I mentioned, learn a lot of lessons of what happened before to replicate it in a better manner. And I guess what was mentioned in the RDNA, one of the aspects, building better was one of the aspects that was really considered. And and one of the questions that were, or the interventions, they said that we need to start implementing or imposing environmental considerations in the projects. The LFF considered all these. There was a list of principles, like environmental principles that needs to be considered. I guess these are lessons. I don't think this is the forum now to discuss lessons learned of what succeeded and what failed, but this is a good practice that can be replicated now for a response, for a localized, community-based response for me. Who's gonna rebuild? I gave the example of 2006, and I hope it could be replicated.
Eli, let's maybe move to the Rubble to Mountains quickly, and then we move to Hazmik because okay.
Rami noted we can we can give examples later. I guess I tapped into some of them. Last, related to rubble to mountains, we did an effort. Unfortunately, it didn't.
Can you just very quickly, in one sentence, say what the project was?
Rubble to Mountains was a project of 3 components. The first one, to manage the debris that was generated by the Beirut port explosion outside the port and in the urban areas, to safely dispose them in a location. Second was to try to benefit from this rubble to generate public furniture, like benches or whatever. And the third, for the contaminated rubble to be disposed and to mend the quarry in the mountain. Of course, doing all the necessary. But unfortunately, we couldn't continue. It was a great opportunity because it wasn't a public entity alone or a UN alone. It was a joint forces. We joined forces with AUB and Neighborhood Initiative. We joined forces with the private sector, with Nestle, Diageo, PepsiCo. We joined forces with the governor of Beirut. But unfortunately, the money was insufficient. And then it was handed over to another entity, and now I learned that the debris that is stacked there will be encapsulated and sent to probably to Zahli, as I heard. So yeah, we had an opportunity to create a construction and demolition waste facility there for Beirut, but unfortunately, due to lack of financing, we couldn't continue.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Hazmik.
First, I'd like to address Samar, because Samar legislation and making it mandatory, obviously with proper implementation and uptake. I mean, we've seen, yes, we're living in Lebanon, we all acknowledge that, and when we travel, we see the utopia of what we would like to bring home, and how people follow the law. I was driving with a friend, was driving in Dubai, and she accidentally just stopped at the red light on the line. Her wheel was on the line, and she was very apprehensive of the ticket that she would have gotten. Why is it that complicated for us to apply that here? Because we don't have a law. And we have a law, we don't have the implementation of that law. And implementing that law today with AI, it's not very complicated, is it? So, and imagine the funds that it could generate. Obviously, it would not go into a corrupt channel eventually, and that kind of funding could be used to the much needed funds that we're talking about having local funding. Single-use plastic, and you find that is a bit off par. However, in Canada, as of the 1st of January 2024, single-use plastic was banned completely and totally, irrelevant of the situation. It's just banned. It's illegal to use single-use plastic. So I think small incremental legislations do make a difference in that sense. And also, when you make legislation mandatory, can we, for 1 second, I didn't want to drive this that way while the minister was here, because I was hoping that it would take his attention. But can you imagine for a minute the financing that you would be generating from private institutions that are following these kinds of guidelines and paying subscriptions to be like the Qatar Stock Exchange today is? I mean, just for 1 second, imagine the numbers. And again, we're touching into local financing. Rami, a note taken. خرج جلسة.
Thank you, Hazmik. Aline.
I'm going to start also from, I'm going to put my academic hat and then remove it and put an activist political hat. It's okay. Not as a politician, but public health is also very much at the politics and the political context. As an academician, as a researcher, up till now, relying only on civil society has been definitely a way of supporting relief, response, recovery, but still up to date, till this date, this system also has failed. And this system has contributed to weakening the government. I disagree. We have contributed in sidelining the government. So now, as a citizen, I put that hat. Maybe it is time to rebuild the state. And how are we going to rebuild it? We have to start somewhere. Hella, it's a utopia, maybe. But I think what keeps us all in this country, at AUB or somewhere else, is that citizenship that we feel and that we are part of a solution. So probably we need to be part of that solution. How to rebuild that, now that's a different...
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership,
Civil
exactly.
society cannot build a country.
Definitely.
It has to have the support of the state.
Exactly.
And the state was never and still is not here.
So we need to rebuild it. We cannot keep sidelining it, that's my point. And if we keep sidelining it by diverting all funds towards NGOs, diverting all funds towards somewhere else, we're not contributing. We need to enhance its governance. We need to enhance its accountability. It's utopia, I know, but I think we need to do it. On environmental justice, we need all also, as activists, to be part of that peace-building environment. Yeah, I need to answer that, Erika. You are right, definitely. We are not looking at the root causes of the problem. We are not. But we should. We need to mobilize them. NGOs, international agencies cannot speak towards building peace, but this is at the heart of it. Building peace, preventing wars. We cannot answer in a different way on, okay, but in the meanwhile, do we focus on doing something a little bit better or not? I would say let's focus on doing small incremental changes in the process. That's, I think, my view. Rami, I think we have a role also as a research institute to document, actually. You are right. To document initiatives and to document best practices. So what are these lessons learned and how can we replicate them, build case studies? I think, yes, definitely.
Thank you to the four of you, to the audience. I'm sorry we couldn't take more questions to close, and before I hand over to Dr. Ael, I want to say that, I think the lesson is very much that we are not allowed to be surprised by crisis. And I think we need to maybe start using the word crisis. So we have particular incidents, but I think being in a global south context, crisis is an inherent component or characteristic of what the country is. There's a spectrum of reasons, structural, contextual, and so on. But at the end of the day, we know more or less what's coming, but that's also a good thing. It means that we can create knowledge on how to predict instability and how to prepare the response. And we, as someone who studied disaster risk reduction, this is the entire concept behind this entire discipline, and it should not be limited to, let's say, infrastructure and so on. Disaster risk reduction is also how to approach business. It's how to approach environmental issues, how to approach governance, how to approach health, and so on, financing, of course. So, I think the main lesson that I try to take from this panel is the importance of disaster risk reduction and not normalizing crisis in the sense that we should be glad that we are in a crisis, but we should also, we need to be confident in our ability to manage these crises because we don't have any other choice. But it also shows that we do have lessons learned. We need to capitalize on them. We need to document them. And I think this is where, compared to a first world country or the global north or whatever you want to designate it, I think this is also something that they don't have. And I think this is where global south institutions can actually bring something to the table rather than being sidelined in a lot of international and global discussions. I want to thank you all for this very interesting conversation. We'll be producing and publishing a small brief summarizing the main takeaways and analyzing and building on what was discussed. Now I would like to invite Dr. Elia Ael, who is the Vice Provost for Research, to deliver closing remarks, and afterwards there will be a small reception for us to continue the conversation outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you so much for the effort.
Thank you, Antoine, for the opportunity to close the session. I'll be very brief. First, to thank our speakers, our distinguished speakers. I think this was a very informative discussion. I would like to thank NCC leadership, Alain and Antoine, for doing this, and the NCC staff, of course, and congratulate you on this series of round discussions that you've had. And summary, yes, we live in a failed state, unfortunately. Our crisis deserves all kinds of descriptors, whether recurrent, compounded, protracted, flare-ups, all kinds of descriptors would apply, unfortunately. Mitigation plans are good, but we don't want to be stuck in mitigation plans. Our speakers spoke about preparedness and being avant-gardiste and not getting to that stage. I think resilience is good, and some of us take pride in being resilient, being a resilient community, but we don't want to be stuck in being resilient. We want to go to the next step. We deserve a good life. We deserve to be, for our kids, to be happy, to create wealth for them and for their kids. Unfortunately, someone mentioned this is now, it sounds like a utopia. It feels like a utopia, but it shouldn't be a utopia. This should be our goal. And I think we need two things. We really need leadership to convince us that this is not utopia, this is the next thing that we should do. But also we need to get into action. And I was very happy to hear about what our speakers thought about the role of AUB, specifically about research in this. And I totally agree with the concept that people have put forward. So definitely innovation, documentation, knowledge generation, and knowledge translation, getting implementation science, getting into action, into policy, and getting into the community. But I think the most important role AUB is playing, and this is exemplified by this session, but by what NCC is doing, is serving as a platform. A platform where you have the freedom of speech, a platform where you have experts from within AUB and from the community coming together and reflecting and debating and also inspiring others about what we as a community could do. A platform where we have passion and where we have a sense of duty. What I've seen from AUB faculty and staff the last couple of months, a sense of duty. We went to talk to them about research. They said, yes, research, but what can we do? And this is people like Issam Srour came forward, and then now we hope, and we need your support, put them at the forefront. So we don't dump the rubble in the sea, but we go for the recycling. So AUB cannot be the NGO, AUB cannot be the government, cannot be the civil society, but with the leadership of AUB, we are committed to be working with all of these as partners. Partnership is the way to go forward. So I would like to stop here to let people get the chance to mingle together a little bit and get back to what they need to do. But again, I would like to thank NCC and say we're looking forward for your next year of roundtables for more discussions and more debates. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Eli, and thank you everyone once again for joining us today. I would like a final thank you is basically to the UB NCC team, especially Anna, Jill, Tatiana, and Salma who worked on this event. Now I would like to invite you to the reception, and we hope to see you in next year's roundtable. Thank you.